What's up, it's ENDYMION, and there's been a lot of discussion online surrounding the next obligatory female-led open-world game, Star Wars Outlaws, and how players, and even journalists, are roasting the game for being not up to snuff against its contemporaries. And the devs think the main character is not ugly, and you are actually all wrong, so we'll talk about that. As well as how another sci-fi franchise is basically dead in the water now with Destiny 2, and how the first Descendant is proving them all wrong in real time. But first, Star Wars Outlaws. You likely have heard of plenty about this game. It stars Kay Vess, or Ma'am Solo, as the remaining fans of Star Wars like to call her. Kay Vess has a discount Sigourney Weaver's haircut and looks almost nothing like the actor she's based on. This brings me to this first article from PC Gamer titled, "As Rage Factories Howl About Kay Vess's Looks, Star Wars Outlaws lead says there's no point engaging with bad faith criticism, no nuance, and no possibility of real dialogue." Here's a snippet of what PC Gamer said here, which kind of already tells you where they stand. They said, "But Star Wars Outlaws features a woman as its protagonist, which means it's also time for the strangest corners of the internet to spin up some of the most baffling discourse they can. In this instance, a minority of very loud commentators have complained that devs have made Outlaws protagonist Kay Vess deliberately unattractive, in order to further some kind of progressive political agenda. Somehow, perhaps Ubisoft character designers are the engineers of the human soul." What the hell does that last part even mean? Ubisoft's designers are engineers of the human soul. PC Gamer just kinda sounds like they're running damage control for the game, cause they, like every other progressive website, is trying to further the agenda that ugly is the way forward. If by engineers of the human soul they mean Ubisoft is good at displaying the ugly parts for all to see, then yeah, they might be right. I mean, objectively, Kay looks nothing like her actor. Here's a side-by-side comparison so you can see. You tell me if this character looks like its actor. There's vague similarities, sure, but it's obvious that all actual attractiveness has been siphoned out of the final product. This isn't new, I mean. I reported months ago about how some game designers admitted that they were being forced to make female characters uglier on purpose in order to not offend the trans player base. Because apparently making a female character too attractive would alienate trans women from being excluded. So instead they made them uglier on purpose and removed any curves to the natural body shape, including bust size and more. And like I argued then, I stand true today saying that they are failing trans players by saying they can only see themselves in ugly characters. And by doing this, they're also failing female and male players too, meaning their efforts are just making nobody happy. They should make idealized looks for everyone, and that would actually work better in their favor, but if they were to admit that that's the right way to go, that would be confirming that their ideology and way of doing things is actually incorrect. And in this day and age, most of these activists would rather die burning in a building of their own design than admit that they were wrong all along. My opinion is that I think Kay looks meh at best. I don't hate the design personally, but I'm not in love with it either. Although, like always, it's yet another modern game featuring a strong female protagonist, and in terms of Star Wars, it's another female-led story, which is just getting tiring and obvious at this point. I also hate when devs and designers say that it's super hard to translate a female actor's face into a game, when they clearly have no problem whatsoever doing it when it comes to male-led games. Look at Cameron Monaghan as Cal Kestis in Jedi Order. It looks exactly like him. There's no debate to be had there. That character looks exactly like their actor. The only consensus here is two things. Either one is Ubisoft didn't want their character to look like the actor, and wanted instead some weird, stylized look with a crimson chin, which is likely what they'll say to save face and bounce criticisms. And the other is simply that they just made her ugly on purpose in order to appease activists. I mean, we know in terms of Star Wars that this has been happening for a while now. How many Rey and Kylo Ren shippers are out there? And apparently the same exists for Osha and Kamir from The Acolyte, which makes no sense. I mean, Kamir literally murders her friends in cold blood. Nothing about any of this makes any sense. But it feels more often than not this is what these devs and producers are focusing on. The weird, terminally online shipper fandoms out there. I mean, that's their target audience. And then there was this article from Gizmodo, which is just really weird, and it's titled, "No one working on Star Wars Outlaws expected the hot droid thirst. Sorry Ubisoft, but never underestimate Star Wars fans' ability to lust for the unlikeliest beings of the galaxy far, far away." Yeah, you heard that right apparently. Fans are lusting over a droid in a trench coat which appears in Outlaws. The character in question is called ND5, and it's confirmed the robot is a former commander droid from the Clone Wars. It's literally just a skinny robot, but it's wearing a trench coat, that's it. I won't lie to you, I do think the design is cool. I think more robots in games is never a bad thing. But this kind of just confirms what I've been saying, is that this is who the modern Star Wars creators are catering to. People who want to ship characters and write fan fictions and want to, I guess, bang commander droids in trench coats somehow. Honestly, I wish Outlaws was about the droid instead of the reject the Warriors cast member instead. Playing a droid in an open world game would actually be very interesting. You could play with the soul in the machine idea, and ask questions whether the droid is actually a person or just code in a steel skeleton. Not to mention, since they are a droid, you could also introduce many cool gadgets and upgrades as you replace parts of your droid's body to better fit different scenarios. It would be like Deus Ex Human Revolution in a way, how you could upgrade Adam's body to hone in on what you wanted to specialize in. Do you want to be strong enough to lift heavy containers or upgrade your legs to jump really high? It would open the level design and exploration a lot, and since they're a droid, you could hack other robots and control them, allowing for cool set pieces like controlling an AT-ST walker or something and then blast foes away. I think I'm just coming up with a game that is far more interesting than what Ubisoft has created here. Instead, you're a human smuggler with a small pet that annoys people if you press the right buttons. Oh well, maybe one day they'll make a cool droid game where you can fly through the galaxy, and since they're a robot, you can really do cool environments, like walking on the coldest or hottest planets where living beings cannot tread. Alright, I'm done daydreaming my ideal droid open world Star Wars game. But even some of the journalists out there are saying from what they played that Outlaws is nothing special in the gameplay department either. This article comes from Engadget. I really want to like Star Wars Outlaws, but 2 previews and 1 deep dive later, I'm not convinced I will. They spent the majority of the article claiming that nothing they played stood out, and everything that they were doing in this game, they had done in other games that were much better. The shooting is apparently basic, generic third-person stuff, and the stealth is classic new school Ubisoft, where you just crouch, and as long as you're not standing directly in the enemy's line of sight, you're pretty much invisible to everyone. They also say in their play sessions that the game has really bad design when it comes to guiding the player as to where they want to go. Apparently at one point, Engadget's journalist here entered a cavern and couldn't see anything in the dark space as to how to move on. They tried jumping forward but died, they went going left and right and nothing. It wasn't until the Ubisoft representative pointed out that way up above the player, completely out of their peripheral vision, was a long cable sitting in an otherwise deeply dark cavern that was borderline impossible to see. And then you were able to use that cable or rope to progress. This apparently kept happening to this journalist. Now, I won't say that this will be the common player experience like this journal was having, but it is objectively the developer's job to make their game flow well and make sense. And clearly, based on this article, this journalist left both play sessions feeling like the game was not specializing itself in any one thing, which makes me feel like Outlaws is going to be a lot like another Ubisoft franchise, that being Watch Dogs. Which, once you get to Watch Dogs Legion, the game just lost its identity almost entirely. And no one part of that game felt like it was specializing itself, you know what I mean, right? How some games do certain mechanics really well to the point of perfection? Think of Super Mario games and how organic the jumping and running feels? Or how Sekiro's parry mechanic is just borderline perfection when it comes to how that should feel in a video game. This is what separates the meh games from the masterpieces. Because instead of trying to do 16 different things okay, They specialize on maybe 3 or 4, and it works way better. Outlaws, to me, seems to be based on these previews and everything to be one of those games that does 20 different things, but doesn't do any of them particularly great. Because Ubisoft wants every game they have coming out to feel like they need to keep having variety without actually refining anything instead. Maybe the shooting sucks, but who cares? Go drive a bike or climb something or do some lockpicking. Just keep distracting yourself with various gameplay mechanics that range from boring to okay. And hopefully, you won't notice that everything is being held together by safety pins and duct tape the entire time. I mean, clearly it's not going well. The IGN preview, as you can see here, has a really bad ratio of likes versus dislikes. Then of course there's this one moment in the IGN preview where players roasted the game and IGN for trying to pass it off as looking cool. I mean, here, watch this.
As such, the blaster battles felt like they had meaningful stakes, and the stealth gameplay had a bit of weight to it because I knew that I'd be up against it.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't take a genius to look at that gameplay clip and think, wow, this doesn't look refined at all.
Meaningful stakes, and the stealth gameplay had a bit of weight to it because that I'd be up.
K-Vess is deflecting blaster shots at point-blank range with her Crimson Chin, and clipping into enemies while other enemies' AI seems to be having an existential crisis in the background. You ask me, Outlaws looks like the most 7 out of 10 game I've seen all year. Maybe a 6. What I mean to say is that the game feels like it will be an average open world game, which I mean, it's made by Ubisoft, so that pretty much checks out. Ubisoft has long forgotten how to be an industry trendsetter. I mean, they ruined Watch Dogs and turned Assassin's Creed into slop over the years too. Especially in Assassin's Creed's case, Ubisoft has pretty much been chasing the CD Projekt Red Witcher 3 formula for like over 7 years now, and they still can't make a game that's better than Witcher 3. Like, you know things aren't good over there at Ubisoft with articles like this from that Park Place. Ubisoft executives get evasive after investors question potential low sales for Star Wars Outlaws and Assassin's Creed Shadows. This article is all about an investors call Ubisoft CEO had, and pretty much they tried to dodge the question when it came to pre-orders for both Outlaws and Shadows. There's a lot being said, but to paraphrase, Ubisoft's investors are anticipating Outlaws sales in the 5 million units area. The investors pretty much keep asking the Ubisoft CEO what they think Outlaws and Shadows will sell compared to previous games. And Ubisoft's CEO just gets really coy and keeps dodging the question, like this is what the CEO said in terms of pre-orders. We don't disclose nor comment on pre-orders usually. What we can say, what we've been observing and measuring, is that our 2 big titles actually are among the most awaited games of the industry, and they enjoy very strong positive community sentiment overall. Nothing he said there tells you whether the pre-order sales are good or not. He just says that the games are the most awaited. But this is how it's going over at Ubisoft. Everyone is hating on the game, investors are panicking and are confused, and Ubisoft's CEO just refuses to actually give any concrete answers to anyone because he likely knows that they're cooked. If these 2 games fail, it's curtains for Ubisoft. Expect a fire sale and for all the executives to scurry like rats under the floorboards. But this is what you get when you make Crimson Chin Simulator starring the Warriors reject cast members. Honestly, part of me just wants to play Outlaws at release so I can make fun of it for all of you guys. Should I do that? Let me know. Now let's move on to Bungie, which has been hit with massive layoffs. The CEO of Bungie, Pete Parsons, said via their blog, and I quote, "Due to rising costs of development and industry shifts as well as enduring economic conditions, it has become clear that we need to make substantial changes to our cost structure and focus development efforts entirely on Destiny and Marathon. That means, beginning today, 220 of our roles will be eliminated, representing roughly 17% of our studio's workforce. These actions will affect every level of the company, including most of our executive and senior leader roles. I realize all of this is hard news, especially following the success we have seen with the final shape, But as we've navigated the broader economic realities over the last year, and after exhausting all other mitigation options, this has become a necessary decision to refocus our studio and our business with more realistic goals and viable financials. For over 5 years, it has been our goal to ship games in 3 enduring global franchises. To realize that ambition, we set up several incubation projects, each seated with senior development leaders from our existing teams. We eventually realized that this model stretched our talent too thin too quickly. It also forced our studio support structures to scale to a larger level that we could realistically support. Additionally, in 2023, our rapid expansion ran headlong into a broad economic slowdown, a sharp downturn in the games industry our quality missed with Destiny 2 Lightfall, and the need to give both the Final Shape and Marathon the time needed to ensure both projects deliver at the quality our players expect and deserve. We were overly ambitious, our financial safety margins were subsequently exceeded, and we began running in the red. After this new trajectory became clear, we knew we had to change our course and speed, and we did everything we could to avoid today's outcome." End quote. And people started flooding social media stating that Pete Parsons had spent millions on classic cars and brought them to Bungie to show off to the developers to flex on them. As this one former Bungie dev said in light of being laid off via social media, "Coward, you did this, you chose this, I'm already listed as do not work with and I don't care anymore. You lied to my face, straight to it, you also invited me to come see your new cars 2 days before you laid me off. 2 effing days, leave now." Yeah, so apparently the CEO has spent the money he made via the Sony buyout to buy somewhere around 24 classic cars so that he could just flex on others, I guess. And like it was said, he was inviting Bungie devs to see his new cars that he bought but ended up laying them off anyway. Like, what the hell are you doing? Bungie, of course, has been known to push nonsense like Latinx or Latinx. I don't know how you say it, it doesn't matter. And all kinds of virtue signaling nonsense initiatives aplenty over the years. And even amid the good devs who got fired, even ones who hate players are being ousted as well. Like this one person, don't harass them by the way, but they used to work at Bungie. They even call themselves in their bio a leftist game designer. So they really want everyone to know that they're a liberal and that comes first before game design. Cool. It was also revealed that this dev supports Sweet Baby Inc. Grums ended up sharing all of this, and they said, "It's always shocking to see the intense hatred, jealousy, and viciousness in the shitty parts of online gaming culture when it rears its head. I will assume anyone who's mad at Sweet Baby Inc. right now is a murderous white supremacist." This person in particular is clearly very lost in the sauce and was sadly the kind of person that Bungie was hiring in droves for the past few years. The woke liberal lunatics who think anyone who thinks differently than them is somehow a racist or something else. I feel for Bungie, but I do think their best days are behind them. I already sort of weaned off Destiny 2, and I've largely abandoned the game almost entirely now that the Final Shape is concluded. I actually only did the Final Shape raid once, and I just can't bring myself to do it again or care anymore. And it's clear that Bungie pushed everyone who worked there to make this one final expansion, and then once the money rolled in and was done, they kinda just threw them all away. Like always, the CEOs running these companies, they hate each and every one of their employees and they just don't see them as human beings. But this mass exodus is not surprising, whether it's the rising cost of games or the moronic tone-deaf virtue signaling that has become far too commonplace. It was only a matter of time before everything capsized and fell apart completely. There's far too much bloat at these major studios, too many poor decisions being made that cost way too much money, and so many activists who genuinely just hate the general gaming populace with all of their being. As I read comments about these Bungie posts, a lot of people don't seem to be sad about this at all. Since Bungie has gone woke for the most part, I mean some of these comments just kind of prove what I've been saying. Leftist game designer, it's like he's asking not to be hired. Good, remove all the activists, every single one of them. Get wrecked, go woke, and get fired. He'll be serving up soy lattes at Starbucks next week. And these comments, they just keep going. I would feel bad for people like this Max Nichols person, but I mean, if you're going to say anyone who is against Sweet Baby is a murderous white supremacist, I mean, these comments, they don't really surprise me at all. This guy is a self-hating liberal. These sorts of people are being thrown out of companies in droves, especially in video games, it seems. And I think based on those comments and the many more that are available, players have entered the state of apathy when it comes to these sorts of things. If woke lunatics are getting laid off, it's seen as a win. As for Bungie's CEO, I mean, he's an absolute moron. He's greedy and he's tone deaf as well. And it doesn't surprise me that a guy like that runs Bungie in the first place and that all the pandering and virtue signaling didn't pay off. Shocking, isn't it? No, you're right. It isn't at all. Bungie made this bed that they're in and now they're dying. I think Destiny is as good as done now, and if you are playing it, it's probably time to move on now. We're never going to see another big expansion. There's reports all over stating that any new content coming to Destiny 2 will be smaller and nowhere near as robust, so yeah, it's kind of over. These live service games can either go two ways. They explode in profit or they blow up entirely. Speaking of profit, let's finally talk about the First Descendant, which is still exploding with players, and apparently doing very well financially for the South Korean dev team behind it. The game already broke 10 million players about a week after release, which is kind of crazy, but not really surprising to be honest. Comparing the First Descendant's female characters to Destiny or Star Wars Outlaws, it's like night and day, dude. Plus, the First Descendant now has summer outfits, which places all the characters in revealing clothing, and big surprise, it's a big hit with fans. I mean, you'd never see such skins in a Western game these days because freaks would lose their minds if female characters actually looked like women. Thankfully, as per usual, Asian developers don't care what the West thinks, and big surprise, it's giving them millions of players and big profits. I don't really have much to say about the First Descendant really other than if you want to make money, well, this is how you do it. If Ubisoft wanted to make more pre-orders, maybe they shouldn't have uglified K-Vest as much as they did. And maybe if Bungie didn't focus so much on shipping characters together instead of focusing on quality and actually giving players what they want, they'd be more profitable too. Look, I don't blame the devs per se when it comes to Bungie for this either. These decisions are obviously made from the top. But it's clear that a lot of these Western studios are just effing around and finding out aplenty in real time these days. Just stop pushing virtue woke ideologies and just start giving people what they want. How much more of Bungie needs to be laid off in the future, or any other studio for that matter? I guess if Bungie really hits hard times, they'll add bikini outfits to the game too. Man, imagine the hatred from journalists if that were to happen. It's also not too late for Outlaws either. Ubisoft just needs to add an alternate, better looking version of K, and I'm sure that it'll sell more. This is where we're at right now. Games aren't selling, woke is dying, and sadly these CEOs are making other people pay the price instead of them. But what do you think about Outlaws? Will you play it? Should I play it so that we can all laugh at it? How about Bungie, Destiny, and the First Descendant? Are you playing those games or are you moving on? What do you think about the West and their uglifying of female characters? Is it hyperbole or is it true? Thank you for watching, subscribe, share, and thanks to my patrons and members. You can become a member for $3 a month if you'd like for exclusive emojis and badges. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you soon.